We know that during World War II, France took only 42 days from the start of the war to surrender. The speed of the French army's capitulation shocked the world. But in fact, there was another country whose army surrendered even faster than France's, Germany's ally, Italy. When we talk about the Italian army in WWII, we often use the term pig teammate, that is, an incompetent ally. That's because, as a member of the Axis powers, the Italian army performed poorly, whether on the European front, the North African front, or even on its own home soil. While Germany advanced with great momentum, Italy decided to attack Greece. Facing the small nation of Greece, Mussolini arrogantly claimed he would take it within 2 weeks. But instead, the Italian army was pushed back by the Greeks and had to be rescued by German forces. On the North African front, the Italian army frequently ran out of fuel and ammunition, but pasta and red wine? Absolutely essential. British forces often found large quantities of unopened pasta, canned goods, and wine in destroyed Italian armored vehicles, everything but fuel. On Italian soil, when the Allies landed in Sicily, many Italian soldiers surrendered without firing a single shot, so quickly that even the Germans and the Allies were shocked. So why was the Italian army so ineffective in World War II? And what bizarre things happened during their campaigns? Today, we'll talk all about the Italian army in World War II. Before WWII officially broke out, Italy had already joined the Axis. At the time, Mussolini, Italy's prime minister, implemented fascist reforms, creating a highly centralized government and becoming Italy's true power holder. He began promoting militarization and expansionism, ideas that aligned perfectly with Hitler's. In fact, Mussolini came to power over a decade before Hitler and was one of the founders of fascism, a major inspiration for Nazi ideology. However, Italy's national strength couldn't support Mussolini's ambitions. He soon realized that Italy would repeatedly fail on the battlefield and that without Germany's help, the fall of the kingdom was imminent. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland, prompting Britain and France to declare war on Germany, marking the start of the largest war in human history, WWII. At this point, Italy, although an Axis member, strangely declared neutrality. Mussolini felt Italy wasn't yet ready for war. After Germany invaded Poland, he even sent a telegram to Hitler saying that if Germany insisted on going to war, Italy could only offer limited support, and attached a long list of material aid requests implying that Italy couldn't actively participate. This was largely because Mussolini feared the strength of Britain and France and wanted to avoid becoming their target. Although he sided with Germany, he was clearly an opportunist, waiting to see how things played out so he could reap benefits from the war. But things changed when Germany quickly blitzkrieged through Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and bypassed France's heavily fortified Maginot Line with a sweeping attack that shocked the world. Within 2 weeks, German forces had crushed France's main army, and France's defeat was certain. Seeing Germany's inevitable victory, Mussolini believed it was the perfect time to join the fight and get a share of the spoils. In June 1940, just as Paris was about to fall, Mussolini decided to strike. He declared war on Britain and France, thinking Germany would take the meat and Italy could sip the soup. Italy launched an attack on southeastern France via the southern Alps. But they didn't expect France to have strong defensive lines there. Combined with bad weather and complex terrain, Italy's hasty entry into the war, with inferior equipment and unprepared troops, led to heavy losses in their assault on French fortifications, costing thousands of lives, and Italy failed to achieve any strategic objectives. They only managed to occupy 20 square kilometers of French borderland, a completely meaningless victory. Meanwhile, Germany had already captured Paris. Hitler privately felt embarrassed by Italy's performance, saying Mussolini had just come along for the ride. After France's fall, most of continental Europe, except the Soviet Union and a few Nordic countries, was under German control. Germany now faced 2 major opponents, the USSR and the UK. But wary of the strength of the Soviet Union, Hitler had already signed a non-aggression pact with them. So he decided to first defeat the weaker UK and then focus on the Soviets. After occupying France, Germany launched Operation Sea Lion to invade the UK, starting with aerial and naval attacks, followed by a land invasion. Britain, however, still held power in the Mediterranean, the Balkans, and North Africa. Hitler wanted Italy to tie down British forces in these areas so Germany could concentrate on its primary battlefront.
In the Balkans, Hitler asked Mussolini to maintain influence over Yugoslavia, Greece, and others, emphasizing containment, not provocation. But Mussolini had his own plans. He believed it was his time to expand Italian influence in the Mediterranean. In October 1940, without Germany's consent, he suddenly attacked Greece. Hitler was furious at this unilateral military action. He feared it would delay Germany's larger plans. Mussolini wanted to show Germany that Italy wasn't useless, and, more importantly, he had a grand dream of reviving the Roman Empire and making Italy the dominant power in the Mediterranean. So he launched full campaigns in the Mediterranean, Balkans, and North Africa. He chose Greece, a weak nation, as an easy starting point. But Italy's attack failed badly. Greek forces not only defended stubbornly, they even counterattacked and reclaimed occupied territories. Hitler was forced to send German troops to assist Italy. In April 1941, German forces invaded Greece. Italy had fought for 6 months and been pushed back, but Germany conquered Greece in just 20 days. This exposed how weak Italy's military really was. However, Italy's navy, in contrast to its army, was much stronger. Being a Mediterranean nation with a maritime tradition, Italy had invested heavily in naval forces. Surprisingly, before WWII, Italy's navy was the third largest in the world, behind only the UK and the US. They had many modern battleships and a large submarine fleet, but they lacked aircraft carriers, a fatal flaw in the era of air dominance. With no carriers and outdated command structures, the Italian Navy was completely outclassed by the British in the Mediterranean. In battles at sea, Italy tried attacking the British Navy but suffered heavy losses and eventually didn't dare enter the eastern Mediterranean. Meanwhile, Mussolini turned his attention to North Africa. Italy had colonial holdings and influence in the region. Before WWII, Britain controlled Egypt and the Suez Canal, a vital route to the Middle East, India, and the Far East. At the time, British forces in North Africa numbered only 36,000, many from Commonwealth countries like Australia, New Zealand, and India. Mussolini aimed to drive them out, occupy Egypt, and control the Suez Canal. Although Hitler wasn't focused on North Africa, he didn't strongly oppose Mussolini's plans and even provided military aid in the winter of 1940. But North Africa wasn't as simple as Mussolini had imagined. Germany soon had to go clean up the mess again. Italy sent 250,000 troops to North Africa, almost 7 times the British force. With German support in fuel and weapons, Mussolini believed they'd easily win. But once again, he was wrong. Though Italy initially advanced and occupied parts of Egypt's border, logistical problems quickly stalled the offensive. Greek forces retook the lost territories, and from then on, Italy began a steady retreat. Then came one of the war's most ridiculous moments. 36,000 British troops chased 250,000 Italians. In a few months, 130,000 Italian soldiers were captured, with almost no resistance. By the time the British reached Benghazi in Libya, Italy's North African force was nearly wiped out. Entire Italian units were cut off early and surrendered. In many cases, British forces arrived to find Italian soldiers boiling water for pasta. They hadn't even fought before being captured. Due to this severe failure, Hitler sent the famous General Rommel and the Afrika Korps to rescue Italy. Rommel was a brilliant commander, praised for his fast decision-making and daring tactics during the Battle of France. Hitler believed he could turn things around in Africa. Though only 50,000 strong, Rommel's forces were well equipped with tanks, infantry, artillery, and air support, including the German Panzer III and IV tanks, which outmatched British tanks. Arriving in 1941, Rommel quickly pushed British forces back, reclaiming territory and nearly reaching Cairo by 1942. Alarmed, the British reinforced their troops to 250,000 and sent General Montgomery to lead. In the Battle of El Alamein, Rommel's aggressive tactics clashed with Montgomery's defensive strategy. It became a battle of spear versus shield. Backed by vast American aid, weapons, fuel, food, and supplies shipped by the US, the British had a major logistical advantage. Rommel, however, relied on Italy's ports and navy for supplies, and the British forces controlled the Mediterranean. Many Italian supply ships were sunk immediately after leaving port. Rommel complained that he only received 20 to 30% of the supplies he needed. Fuel shortages were especially severe. By late 1942, his tanks could only operate for a few hours a day. Italy's logistics were poor and irrational. They prioritized pasta and wine over ammunition and fuel. Soldiers cooked gourmet stews in the desert, not just military slop, even during combat. One British unit captured an Italian officer's notebook, which contained no battlefield notes, only recipes. How to make the perfect meat sauce in the desert, first brew coffee, and red wine lists for the North African heat. Even German officers joked, Italians fight like poets and supply like food critics.
By the war's end, food shortages became dire. Malnutrition caused illness, soldiers lost teeth, and Rommel developed ulcers. Meanwhile, Mussolini sent fancy dress uniforms for a Cairo victory parade that never happened. Rommel, frustrated, bypassed Italian command to complain to Hitler, but Hitler wasn't prioritizing North Africa and gave minimal support. This strained German-Italian relations. Eventually, Rommel allowed German forces to directly seize Italian supplies. This demoralized Italian troops, and many surrendered to the Allies. Rommel bitterly remarked, "We wait for fuel, they wait for wine. We want to charge, they want lunch." In 1942's Battle of El Alamein, Montgomery's tactics and superior logistics wore down the Axis. Rommel's forces had to retreat. Although called the German-Italian Army, North Africa was essentially Germany fighting alone. Outnumbered and outgunned, defeat was inevitable. By May 1943, Axis forces in North Africa surrendered. The Allies landed in Sicily, and Italian troops began surrendering en masse, often without firing a shot. Facing the threat of national collapse, the Italian parliament and army supported the king. Though Mussolini was in power, Italy still maintained a constitutional monarchy. King Victor Emmanuel III dismissed Mussolini and had him secretly imprisoned in a mountaintop hotel. He then began negotiating surrender with the Allies. To prevent Italy from switching sides, Hitler considered several responses, including invading Italy and arresting the king. But occupied in Europe, he instead launched a secret rescue mission, the Gran Sasso Raid. German paratroopers and SS commandos rescued Mussolini in a surprise glider attack with zero casualties or resistance. Mussolini was flown back to Germany. There, under Hitler's support, he founded the Italian Social Republic, a puppet fascist state in northern Italy. But Mussolini had no real power. Germany controlled everything. Eventually, as the Allies advanced, this regime collapsed.
Mussolini was captured and executed by partisans in April 1945 while trying to flee to Switzerland. Even Hitler privately admitted Italy's army was one of Europe's weakest and Mussolini was a blustering, incompetent actor. But was the Italian army entirely useless? Not quite. They had one elite unit, the 185th Paratrooper Division Folgore. Being mountainous, Italy had early experience with airborne troops. The Folgore Division was well-trained, well-equipped, and highly motivated, armed with Beretta M38A submachine guns, carbines, mortars, and anti-tank weapons, comparable to German paratroopers. In the Second Battle of El Alamein, they were deployed on the southern flank against overwhelming British forces. Despite being outnumbered more than 10-1, they held the line. They infiltrated enemy lines, raided British HQ, and even captured a brigade commander. In one battle, 50 paratroopers held off over 2,000 British troops, buying precious time for the Germans. Even Rommel praised them as one of the best units he'd seen in North Africa.
They never surrendered, even when out of food and ammunition. By war's end, only 306 remained. Later, they sided with Mussolini's puppet regime and kept fighting. Italy's poor WWII performance was due to outdated equipment, inexperienced commanders, and terrible logistics. The entire system, political, strategic, and organizational, was a mess, led by a delusional dreamer. In the end, they became a laughingstock on the battlefield. If you found this story about Italy's forgotten WWII legacy interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who loves history. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was Italy truly the weakest Axis power?